TikTok is getting in bed with journalists and media companies. But maybe the worst is its relationship with fact-checkers. If you see this, it'll be a miracle because YouTube doesn't really like me talking about its fact-checkers. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. If you want to be cool with the youths these days, where do you go? Why, TikTok, of course. In fact, in a move that doesn't at all scream desperation, U.S. President Joe Biden has joined TikTok in a bid to reach younger voters. That's despite his own government banning the app on all federal devices, which just goes to show how low his poll numbers are these days. 4 years ago, he was telling his campaign staff to delete TikTok from their phones. Now there's a good reason Biden issued the ban. TikTok's parent company is ByteDance, which is a China-based company that, shall we say, has very close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. It's probably vacuuming up Americans' data as we speak. And since we know China has been preparing for war against the U.S., probably the less information they have on us, the better. Security concerns aside, though, Biden has the right instinct when it comes to targeting young people. According to the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, TikTok reaches 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds. And that's up 4 percentage points from the year before. That's the reason journalists and media companies are also flocking to TikTok. The Washington Post has dedicated a whole team to TikTok since 2019. Although I can't say it bodes well for them that they have to let people know they're a newspaper. Some media companies, like Vice News, have made it central to their content strategy, which is probably why, despite U.S. leaders saying TikTok is a cybersecurity risk, Vice says banning TikTok is unconstitutional, ludicrous, and a national embarrassment. Yes, wouldn't it be a national embarrassment if the U.S. were to ban an app that admitted to spying on reporters? Not to mention censoring content critical of China. And banning people like NBA star Enes Kanter, who speaks out about China's human rights abuses. What do you think? Should I start a TikTok account just to prove the point? Let me know in the comments. But it's not just Vice and the Washington Post. According to the Reuters Institute, about half of top news publishers are now creating content for TikTok. Now that makes sense when you look at how trust in traditional media is declining, while at the same time more people are getting their news from TikTok. Just look at how TikTok has taken off when it comes to users who regularly get their news from it versus all other platforms. But Reuters also found that while mainstream journalists often lead conversation around news in Twitter and Facebook, they struggle to get attention in newer networks like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. You don't say. I guess that's why 20-something-year-old news daddy Dylan Page has 10 times the number of followers as the Washington Post. I'm sure you're just a few viral videos away from catching up to him, though, Wapo. But with all these media companies flocking to TikTok to reach a younger audience, it raises the question of what media companies would do if TikTok were banned in the U.S. Donald Trump tried to get ByteDance to divest from TikTok over national security concerns when he was in office. But lawsuits prevented his orders from taking effect, and he had to leave office before the appeals process was over. Then, when Biden came into office, he dropped the case and ordered a national security review of TikTok instead. Now, there's still a possibility that TikTok could face a national ban in the U.S., especially if Trump comes back into office, which raises the question, would this hurt news companies' bottom line? Would it affect their brand recognition with younger audiences? And more importantly, what influence does this give TikTok over them to lobby for its cause? Already we know TikTok has been asking users to pressure their representatives over a potential ban. Here's TikTok's CEO the day before he testified before Congress last March.
Let me know in the comments what you want your elected representatives to know about what you love about TikTok.
TikTok influencers also visited Washington the day he testified to pressure their representatives to drop their support for a ban. But ByteDance is a big company, and big companies frequently lobby government representatives. That's just how the game is played. But what if TikTok was exerting similar influence over media companies? That's a step more insidious than having your fans show up at your hearing with signs. And even if TikTok didn't try to exert influence over media companies, would they, like I showed with Vice earlier, be motivated to make their coverage of a TikTok ban more favorable to TikTok because they don't want to lose their audience there? This is a sticky situation, and it's even stickier than you think. Time to follow the money. But first, in a world where large numbers of young people get their news from TikTok, it's more important than ever that you don't just rely on 1 or 2 or 3 media companies for your news. That's why I use Ground News, our longtime sponsor, when I want to see what's happening in the world. For example, Ground News instantly gives me over 150 articles published about Biden's campaign joining TikTok, interestingly, from across the political spectrum. These ratings are a combination of 3 expert rating organizations that factor in things like how subjective the language is. What's really interesting is how coverage differs from left-leaning and right-leaning sources. The left seems to be concerned with security issues, while the right criticizes his desperate attempt. And with each article, you can see where the funding comes from, as well as how factual it tends to be and which way it leans politically. And you can do this for any topic. I'm following news on China and TikTok, for example. And this kind of thing is why I use Ground News. It's on a mission to hold the media accountable and provide context, so we can see how media narratives can easily shape public opinion. It's a great place to go if you want to be more informed than the average newsreader and find multiple perspectives, or stories you might otherwise have missed. And that's why we're working with Ground News to sponsor this video, because we believe what they're doing is important. So sign up at ground.news/China or through my link below and get 40% off the Vantage level subscription for unlimited access, which is what I use. Or you can even try it out for $1 this month. The link is in the description. So, journalists and newsrooms being on TikTok isn't great, but there's an even more insidious way that TikTok may be influencing not just media companies, but fact-checking organizations and other social media companies as well. If you've been watching China Uncensored for a while, you know we've had videos age-restricted, demonetized, and even taken down. And guess how YouTube decides what videos run afoul of their community guidelines. It says that for all its products, including Google News, YouTube, and its Fact Checker Explorer, it relies on independent fact-checking organizations and reputable publishers. We couldn't find a list of the organizations it considers reputable, but in 2022, YouTube said it gave a $13.2 million grant to the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN, at the nonprofit Poynter Institute to launch a new global fact-check fund to support their network of 135 fact-checking organizations. If you're not familiar with Poynter, it caters to the media industry by providing industry-focused research, newsletters, and training. It also owns the Times Publishing Company, which has several publications in Florida. And in addition to founding the International Fact-Checking Network, Poynter is also the founder of the fact-checking and media literacy project, MediaWise, as well as PolitiFact, another fact-checking organization. So the Poynter Institute's International Fact-Checking Network received money from YouTube, which it fact-checks. I sense a potential conflict of interest here. But YouTube and Google aren't Poynter's only backers. TikTok is as well. TikTok partners with PolitiFact to review TikTok videos for accuracy, one of 18 organizations that it calls its fact-checking partners. We don't know exactly how much TikTok pays PolitiFact for its services, but PolitiFact listed TikTok as one of only 2 organizations that is funding over 5% of its budget. The reason this is important because we know that, whether intentionally or not, where the money comes from has influence. As Victor Prickard, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Annenberg School for Communication, said, journalists internalize broader power relationships that can help steer media coverage in particular ways. A case in point, the Washington Post being owned by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. As one Washington Post journalist told Columbia Journalism Review, he didn't see Bezos interfering in the paper's editorial at all, but he did feel reluctant to take him on. I'm guessing he means in a journalistic sense. Although I wouldn't want to take him on in a physical fight either. He looks pretty fit. So when TikTok gives Poynter $25,000 for its United Facts of America conference, Does that affect anything? Or when TikTok sponsors Pointer's Global Fact-Checking Summit, Global Fact, are the fact-checkers more likely to speak kindly towards the source of their funding? TikTok is also listed as a sponsor of MediaWise, which again is Pointer's media literacy project. Phew. TikTok is funding so many Pointer projects, it should change its name to Pointer Talk. Or Pointer Tick? Point TikTok. Anyway, you get the idea. TikTok is a big funder of Pointer, arguably one of the most influential media organizations in the US, if not the world. And Pointer's fact-checking network doesn't just work with Google and TikTok, it also works with Facebook. Facebook doesn't spell out what organizations it uses specifically for its fact-checking, only that they are signatories to the nonpartisan International Fact-Checking Network Code of Principles. However, it seems likely that Facebook contracts with PolitiFact because Facebook is listed as the only other funder that pays more than 5% of its budget. So in a hypothetical scenario where a deadly virus originates in China and spreads around the world, but China tries to cover it up and blame everyone else for it, what would fact-checkers paid by TikTok do? Would they give more weight to China's perspective than they otherwise would because they're worried about their TikTok funding? Now, I'm not saying money would be the only consideration. Obviously, I'm describing COVID, and the origin of that became highly politicized here in the US during the pandemic. But let's say a TikTok-paid company like PolitiFact looked at the claim, "We all know China created COVID," and labeled it false. That fact check would make its way into Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Google News, Google Fact Check Explorer, YouTube, and TikTok. And those are just social media companies. It could also be used by journalists in newsrooms across the world to shape their coverage. Now, clearly, there's not a lot of nuance in that statement. But to label it completely false, especially now that both the FBI and the Department of Energy believe that COVID came from a lab leak, is pretty irresponsible. What's also irresponsible, in my opinion, is setting standards for fact-checkers and then not following them. One of the International Fact-Checking Network's principles is a commitment to transparency of funding. Now, Pointer does a good job of making themselves look transparent by linking to versions of all their 990s over the past 5 years. But you can't actually tell anything about their funding sources because all the donor data has been removed. Now, without inside information, it's hard to say what, if any, effect TikTok's funding of Pointer has. Maybe, like PolitiFact claims, donors have no say in the ratings PolitiFact issues. But that doesn't mean there's no influence at all. We know China has used its proxies to try and influence media coverage in other countries. Chinese state media actors have been cultivating local media to propagate particular narratives through the Belt and Road News Network, a transnational network of 213 media organizations from 99 countries whose secretariat is run by the People's Daily. The Belt and Road News Network hands out Silk Road Global News Awards that incentivize journalists to show China's Belt and Road in a positive light. And according to Bloomberg News, between 2008 and 2018, China invested $2.8 billion into overseas media. China regularly conducts exchange programs for foreign reporters from several countries, organizes training for journalists in Chinese cities, and holds regular discussions with foreign journalists and Chinese media unions. China is very aware that its propaganda outlets are not taken seriously in the West. But if it can influence individual journalists or newsrooms there, that propaganda has a much better chance of succeeding. According to Freedom House, Chinese state media went on a $7 million spending blitz between 2019 and 2021 to put China Daily, or the Xinhua news content, in national and regional news outlets, such as Times Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, CNN, and Foreign Policy. Now that might seem like kind of blatant propaganda, but a lot of the content was not labeled as state media or even branded as China Daily or Xinhua. Lawfare, which describes itself as being devoted to hard national security choices, published an article about TikTok's plan to remain operational in the United States. There, it disclosed that one of its authors was the director of the Center on Technology Policy at UNC Chapel Hill, which had received direct funding from TikTok. Now, don't get me wrong, the center has a lot of sponsors that look like conflict of interest. So TikTok clearly isn't the only problem here. But you see the pattern. TikTok is investing in organizations that can have an influence on how it's perceived in the US. And it's not just media companies either. It's also getting into fashion, art, and music as well. TikTok's CEO is the honorary chair of the Met Gala this year because TikTok is sponsoring the event. And last year, it held its first live music festival in Mesa, Arizona. It's also running an ad campaign called TikTok Sparks Good, which is about as transparent an attempt to not get canceled as there could be. Now, I've got a video I want to show you, but first, check out this episode's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is a great tool to help you stay well informed about what's happening in the world and how it's being covered by all sides of the political spectrum. Check it out at ground.news/China or click the link below to get 40% off a Vantage level subscription. And remember, we don't get funding from TikTok, which is why we're able to remain uncensored. But we do rely on viewers like you to keep making great episodes. Visit patreon.com/China Uncensored. All it takes is as little as $1 per episode, and you can even set a monthly limit so you only give us $1 a month. And as a thank you, I'll answer your questions at the end of these episodes. Today's question comes from Jeff Lockwood. Where would we be without PolitiFact educating us odiferous peasants? Oh, that's a perfect question for this episode. So Jeff was responding to an episode we did about the surge of illegal Chinese immigrants crossing the US-Mexico border. The numbers have skyrocketed. But what does PolitiFact say? Why that being concerned about all these Chinese military-age men flooding across the border are unfounded scare tactics. In fact, PolitiFact dismisses the notion of a stealth invasion by China using illegal immigrants as nonsense and fear-mongering. And I'm sure any accusation that PolitiFact might be swayed by China's money is also fear-mongering. Thanks for your question and your support, Jeff. So, there's a lot of dark forces at work in the world today. And it would be easier and a lot more comfortable to just ignore it and try and go about your day. But you can only do that for so long before it comes back to bite you. Of course, YouTube might not like me suggesting you stand up to the evil in the world now, so I'm hiding that conversation in gaming content on my new show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. Check out the video and let's fight back against the tides of darkness together. These claims have not been verified by PolitiFact. And click on the orange button to support China Uncensored on Patreon. Remember, that's where most of our budget comes from, not China. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.